I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her face. I began, my voice trembling as I recounted the night to my closest friend, Emma. The way Clara looked at me when we announced the pregnancy, it was like she was staring straight through me with a knife. Emma's eyes widened, her mouth slightly agape. "Are you sure? I mean, you don't think you're overreacting?" "I wish I were," I replied, shaking my head. "It's just, well, everything went downhill from there. I can hardly believe it myself, even now." The night of the announcement was supposed to be a joyful celebration. Jake and I had been married for 3 years, and the news of our pregnancy was meant to be the highlight of the evening. We had invited close friends and family to our home for a small party, and Clara, my sister-in-law, was among the guests. From the start, there was an air of tension around her, but I had attributed it to my own nerves. As the party progressed, Jake and I took to the center of the room, ready to share our big news. We were met with cheers and applause from everyone except Clara, who stood at the back, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a tight line. I tried to brush it off as a personal issue, but the feeling of unease lingered. After the initial excitement had settled and guests were mingling, Clara approached me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low and strained. I was taken aback but nodded, leading her to a quieter corner of the room. "What's up?" I asked, attempting to keep my tone light. "I don't know how to say this," Clara started, her gaze shifting uncomfortably. "But you've really messed things up." "Messed things up?" I echoed, confusion evident in my voice. "How do you figure?" Clara's eyes flashed with something dark, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "You've just made everything so complicated. I was hoping for a bit more, consideration for the family." I didn't quite understand what she meant, but her tone was dismissive, bordering on hostile. "I'm sorry if you feel that way. I thought we were celebrating." "Yeah, well, not everyone shares your enthusiasm," she replied curtly before walking away. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and attempts to ignore Clara's coldness. Jake and I tried to stay positive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. Later that night, as the party was winding down, Clara made her way to the kitchen where I was alone, tidying up. She was holding a tray with a selection of appetizers. "Here, take this," she said, placing it on the counter. "Thanks," I said, eyeing the tray with a hint of suspicion. The appetizers were from a batch I hadn't seen before, but I was too preoccupied to think much of it. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just wanted to make sure you had something to nibble on," she replied, her voice almost too sweet. I managed a weak smile before she left the kitchen. As I picked at the appetizers, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. My mind kept returning to Clara's odd behavior. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the stress of the evening. The next morning, however, things took a turn for the worse. I woke up feeling ill, nausea and dizziness had me rushing to the bathroom. I tried to remember what could have caused it but came up blank. When Jake came into the room, his face filled with concern, I was barely able to explain what was happening. "I think we should go to the hospital," Jake said firmly, his worry palpable. At the hospital, after a series of tests, the doctors finally gave us the devastating news: I had been poisoned. The symptoms matched a particular toxin, one that wasn't easily detectable. My heart sank as the implications began to sink in. Jake's face turned ashen when the doctors explained what had happened. "Who could have done this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, feeling a chill run down my spine. "But I have a pretty strong suspicion." By the time we returned home, the reality of the situation hit hard. Clara had been acting increasingly strange throughout the evening, and in hindsight, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. She had always been somewhat envious of the attention Jake and I received, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. The following days were a whirlwind of police investigations and legal proceedings. Clara's odd behavior and the fact that she had been present during the party led to her being questioned. It was clear that she had been motivated by jealousy, but proving her guilt was another matter. Emma listened intently, her face reflecting the shock and disbelief I felt. "So, what happened next?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "It was a long and painful process," I continued, my voice wavering. "But eventually, Clara's involvement came to light. The evidence was overwhelming, and she was arrested." Emma gasped. "And now she's facing jail time?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And she's also going through a divorce. It's been a nightmare, but at least we're slowly finding some semblance of normalcy again." Emma reached out and took my hand. "I can't believe she would do something like that. It's so cruel. I still can't wrap my head around it," I admitted. "But I'm just grateful that Jake and I can move forward and focus on the positive, our growing family." As I finished recounting the events to Emma, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Clara's actions had shattered the joy of what should have been a happy occasion, but through it all, Jake and I had come out stronger. The journey ahead would be challenging, but we were ready to face it together. "Can you believe she actually tried to poison you?" Emma asked, disbelief still evident in her voice. "It's like something out of a bad soap opera." "I know," I replied, staring into my coffee cup. "It's surreal. I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to understand how things went so wrong." Emma and I had moved from the initial shock to a phase of analytical conversation, trying to piece together the night's events. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, hospital visits, and a constant, gnawing anxiety about Clara's motives. Jake and I had decided to go through our own mental checklist of everything that transpired on the night of the party. The more we discussed it, the clearer it became that Clara had planned her actions meticulously. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment act of jealousy but a calculated attempt to ruin our happiness. We found ourselves revisiting the party in our minds, retracing our steps. "Do you remember Clara mentioning anything about the appetizers?" Jake asked one evening as we sat together in our living room. "I remember she was a bit strange about them," I said, recalling the uneasy encounter in the kitchen. "But I didn't think much of it at the time." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing. Clara had always been meticulous about things. It wasn't like her to just offer something without a reason. Especially given how she'd been acting. The realization that Clara's jealousy might have driven her to such extremes was both chilling and maddening. She had always been envious of our relationship, our successes, and now, it seemed, she couldn't handle the news of our pregnancy. As Jake and I worked through our feelings, the police investigation was progressing. Clara's motives were becoming clearer, thanks to the evidence that had come to light. The police had discovered that Clara had purchased the poison from a local supplier weeks before the party, a detail that was both disturbing and damning. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some of the gifts and cards we had received from the party, Jake burst into the room. "You won't believe this," he said, his face flushed with a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Clara's husband, Richard, called me. He wants to talk." "What did he say?" I asked, my heart racing at the thought of further complications. "He's devastated," Jake replied, sitting down next to me. "He says he had no idea about Clara's plans. He's deeply apologetic and wants to make amends in any way he can." I was taken aback. Richard had always seemed like a decent guy, but hearing this news made me question everything. "What does he want to discuss?" Jake sighed. "He wants to explain that Clara had been hiding her bitterness for a long time and that he had no clue about her actions. He's also willing to cooperate with the investigation and provide any information he can." I felt a pang of sympathy for Richard, but it was quickly overshadowed by the need for justice. "I suppose we should at least hear him out," I said reluctantly. The next day, Richard came over to our house. He looked weary and heartbroken, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and stress. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I never imagined Clara would go this far. She's always been a bit jealous, but I had no idea she harbored such hatred." Jake nodded, his expression stern but sympathetic. "We appreciate your honesty, Richard. But you have to understand that this has been incredibly difficult for us." Richard nodded fervently. "I understand. I just want to do everything I can to help. I'm cooperating fully with the police, and I've provided them with all the information I have about Clara's activities leading up to the party." Over the following weeks, Richard's cooperation proved invaluable. The police investigation revealed a pattern of Clara's resentment and insecurity, which culminated in the drastic steps she took. Clara's history of erratic behavior and jealousy made her actions seem almost inevitable in hindsight, though no one could have predicted such a violent outcome. As the trial approached, Clara's behavior in court was a stark contrast to her previously aloof demeanor. She appeared distraught and remorseful, though her apology came too late to undo the damage. The trial was a grueling experience, with testimonies from various witnesses, including Richard, who described Clara's deteriorating mental state. "I never thought I'd have to face something like this," Richard said in his testimony, his voice trembling. "Clara was always a loving wife, but the envy and jealousy she felt towards my brother and his family consumed her. Despite her apparent remorse, Clara's actions had severe consequences. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was found guilty of attempted poisoning. The verdict was delivered with a heavy sense of justice, but the emotional scars remained. As Clara was led away, Jake and I were left to process the enormity of what had happened. The nightmare was over, but the impact of Clara's actions would linger for a long time. Emma, who had been a constant source of support throughout the ordeal, sat beside me as I reflected on the past few months. "You've been incredibly strong through all of this," she said softly. "I'm so proud of how you've handled everything." "Thank you," I replied, squeezing her hand. "It's been a tough journey, but I'm grateful for the support of friends like you." As Jake and I began to rebuild our lives, we focused on the future and the arrival of our baby. The joy of our growing family helped to heal some of the wounds caused by Clara's actions. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but we faced them with renewed strength and a deeper appreciation for the love and support we had. The trauma of the past few months had tested us in ways we never expected, but it also reaffirmed our commitment to each other. We looked forward to the future with hope, knowing that together, we could overcome anything. Are you ready for this? Jake asked as we stood outside the baby store, looking up at the cheerful sign. It's going to be our first big shopping trip for the nursery. I took a deep breath and smiled, trying to shake off the lingering tension from the past few months. I think so. I'm excited, but also a bit overwhelmed. Jake reached for my hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. We've got this. It's a fresh start, and we're moving forward. With that, we stepped inside, greeted by rows of colorful baby gear and furniture. It felt like a world of possibilities opening up before us. We had been focusing on healing and moving on since the trial, and now, as we prepared for our baby's arrival, it was a welcome distraction from the past. As we wandered through the aisles, selecting everything from crib sets to tiny onesies, the weight of Clara's actions seemed to lift, if only for a little while. We discussed names and debated over shades of paint for the nursery, our excitement growing with every decision. I think the pale blue is perfect, I said, holding up a sample swatch. It's calming and goes well with the rest of the room. Jake nodded in agreement. I love it. And this crib, do you think it'll be comfortable enough? It's got great reviews, I assured him, trying to balance the various options we were considering. And it's sturdy. That's the most important thing. We spent hours at the store, immersed in the joyful chaos of preparing for our baby. It was a much-needed reprieve from the stress of the past months, and it felt good to focus on something positive. As we loaded the car with our purchases and headed home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I think we've done pretty well today, I said, glancing at Jake with a grin. We have, Jake agreed, beaming. And we've got a lot more to look forward to. I'm really proud of how we've handled everything. Back at home, as we began to unpack and organize the baby items, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, but they had also strengthened our relationship and reaffirmed our commitment to each other. In the midst of our preparations, I received a letter from Clara's lawyer. The letter was an apology from Clara herself, expressing her remorse and regret for the pain she had caused. Reading her words, I felt a mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a grudging understanding of her own suffering. It's surreal, I said to Jake, showing him the letter. Clara's apology seemed so empty after everything that happened. Jake took the letter and read through it, his expression thoughtful. I think she's genuinely sorry for what she did. But it doesn't change the fact that her actions had serious consequences. I agree, I said, taking the letter back. I suppose it's important for me to acknowledge her apology, but it doesn't erase the impact of what she did. As we continued to prepare for our baby's arrival, the letter became a symbol of the complex emotions we were working through. It was a reminder that healing was not just about moving on but also about understanding and processing the past. Months passed, and our lives began to settle into a new routine. The nursery was finally complete, and we eagerly awaited the arrival of our baby. Each day brought new anticipation and excitement, as well as moments of quiet reflection on the journey we had endured. One evening, as Jake and I sat together in the finished nursery, the reality of our impending parenthood began to sink in. It's amazing how far we've come, Jake said, gazing around the room with a sense of pride. We've turned a challenging time into something beautiful. I know, I replied, my voice filled with emotion. It's been a tough road, but I'm grateful for the love and support we've had. And now, we're starting a new chapter. Jake wrapped his arm around me, and we sat in silence, absorbing the calm and contentment of the moment. The room was filled with soft light, and the gentle hum of a lullaby playing from a nearby speaker added to the peaceful atmosphere. As the days turned into weeks, we continued to prepare for our baby's arrival, and our excitement grew with each passing day. The trial and its aftermath were behind us, but the experience had shaped us in ways we hadn't fully realized. One morning, as I sat in the nursery, sorting through baby clothes, Jake walked in with a small, wrapped gift. I have something for you, he said, handing me the package. Curious, I unwrapped the gift to find a beautiful locket inside. It's lovely, I said, touched by the gesture. What's the significance? Jake smiled warmly. I wanted to give you something to commemorate this new beginning. Inside the locket is a small photo of us and a tiny space for our baby's first picture. I looked at the locket, my eyes welling up with tears. Thank you. This means so much to me. Jake kissed me gently. We've been through a lot, but we've come out stronger. I'm looking forward to every moment we'll share with our little one. As we prepared to welcome our baby into the world, the challenges of the past seemed to fade, replaced by the joy and anticipation of what lay ahead. The love and support we had received from each other and our friends had been invaluable, and we were ready to embrace the future with hope and excitement. The arrival of our baby would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise and possibilities. The trials we had faced had only deepened our appreciation for each other and strengthened our bond. As we awaited the moment our lives would change forever, we knew that whatever challenges came our way, we would face them together, with love and resilience. The day our baby arrived was a turning point in our lives, one that was filled with a mixture of exhilaration, exhaustion, and sheer joy. I remember the first moments clearly, despite the blur of everything that had happened. I was lying in the hospital bed, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety as the contractions intensified. Jake was by my side, his hand gripping mine with a steady reassurance that helped me stay focused. The room was filled with the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional rustling of nurses moving around. "I can't believe this is really happening," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. "We're about to become parents." "I know," I replied, trying to catch my breath between contractions. "It feels surreal." The hours seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, the moment came when our baby made their grand entrance into the world. The cry of our newborn was the sweetest sound I had ever heard, and as they were placed in my arms, I felt a surge of overwhelming love and relief. Jake's eyes were misty as he looked at our baby. "They're perfect," he said softly, his voice choked with emotion. I nodded, unable to speak through the tears of happiness. We had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now that it was here, it was more beautiful than we could have imagined. In the days that followed, as we settled into the rhythm of new parenthood, the challenges of the past seemed to recede into the background. The nursery, which had once been a symbol of our preparations, was now a cozy space filled with the soft sounds of our baby's contented coos and the occasional midnight feedings. Our friends and family visited us, offering their congratulations and support. Emma was one of the first to come by, bringing a homemade casserole and a bouquet of flowers. She cooed over the baby and shared in our joy, her presence a comforting reminder of the strength of our friendships. "This little one is so lucky to have you both as parents," Emma said, holding the baby gently. "I'm thrilled for you." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "We're so grateful for your support through everything." As the weeks turned into months, Jake and I adjusted to our new roles and the demands of parenthood. We faced sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but every challenge was outweighed by the joy of watching our baby grow and develop. Each milestone, from the first smile to the first steps, was a reminder of the incredible journey we had been through. Despite the happiness of our new life, there were still moments of reflection on the past. Clara's actions had left a mark on us, and there were times when the memories of the trial and its aftermath would resurface. But as we focused on our baby and the future, we found solace in the love and support we had from each other and those around us. One evening, as we sat together in the nursery, rocking the baby to sleep, Jake turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking about how much we've been through. It's incredible how we've come out of it stronger." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "It really is. We've faced so many challenges, but through it all, we've managed to find our way." Jake smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "And now we have this beautiful little person to focus on. It feels like a new beginning." Our baby's arrival had indeed marked the start of a new chapter in our lives. The past was always a part of us, but it was no longer the defining feature of our journey. We had turned a page and were embracing the future with open hearts. As we watched our baby sleep peacefully, I realized that despite the trials we had faced, we had built something beautiful and enduring. Our family was stronger and more resilient than ever, and we were ready to face whatever came our way with hope and love. The road ahead was filled with promise, and as we looked to the future, we knew that we had the strength and support to navigate whatever challenges might arise. The love we shared and the joy of our growing family were the foundations upon which we would build our lives, and we were excited to see where this new journey would take us.